I never thought that finishing my regular shift at a coffee shop would become the strangest and most dangerous turning point of my life. I stood behind the counter, my tired hands wiping down the last cup, when a small child approached me. About 7 years old, with big hazel eyes and messy brown hair, he pulled out crumpled dollar bills from his tiny pockets and placed them in front of me with such intensity that I was shocked. "Mister here, I need to hire you," he said in a completely serious tone. I stared at the child in disbelief, then at the notes scattered across the counter. "Probably $300. Hire me for what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Yes, you need to go on a date with my dad. He's very lonely and never smiles anymore. Please." My heart pounded hard. It took me a few seconds to understand what position I had gotten myself into. The child was serious, completely serious. And honestly, I was so financially tight that the money seemed necessary. But this whole situation felt absurd. I looked at the child with a slight laugh and started to kid. "It doesn't work like that. I can't go on a fake date with." But I couldn't finish my sentence, because that's when I saw him. At the entrance, a man stood there, lean-built with broad shoulders, wearing a sleek charcoal gray suit that looked minimalist yet expensive. His piercing green eyes stared directly at me. He wasn't moving, just watching me, the child, and then those dollar bills. My breath stopped. Suddenly everything made sense. This child was his son, and that man, who was now slowly walking toward me, he probably wasn't just any ordinary person. Power radiated from his body language, confidence stamped into every step. I gulped as he reached the counter and looked at his son, then at me with a completely unreadable expression. "Caleb," he said, calling his son's name. "What have you done?" The child, Caleb, stepped back sheepishly. "Daddy, I was just trying to help. You need someone, and this guy seems nice." The CEO, or whatever he was, looked back at me, and this time I saw something else in his eyes. Perhaps embarrassment, a bit of confusion, and curiosity. "I'm Hendrix." He extended his hand. I hesitantly shook it, feeling his grip, strong, warm, authoritative. "Ryan," I whispered, barely managing to say my name. This situation felt completely surreal. "I apologize for my son's creativity," Hendrix said, though there was a faint smile in his eyes that quickly disappeared, replaced by seriousness. "But if you have time." He paused. Wait, what? Was he actually seriously considering his son's crazy plan? I looked at him with a confused expression. "I'll compensate you properly. Just one dinner, to make Caleb happy. Nothing more." My heart was racing. I desperately needed that money, but this whole thing felt so wrong, so complicated. Yet I heard myself saying, "Yes. Okay, one dinner." Hendrix nodded, but when he came closer to me, lowering his voice, he said, "But understand this, Ryan. This is just for show. Don't think anything else." There was a warning in his eyes, and I stood there feeling a strange knot in my throat, wondering what I had agreed to. Because one thing was clear, this Hendrix wasn't just a simple CEO, and I had now become a variable in his carefully controlled life that he might not be able to control. The weight of that moment stayed with me as I watched them leave the coffee shop. Caleb waved enthusiastically at me through the glass door, his innocent smile lighting up his entire face, while Hendrix walked beside him with rigid posture, his hand protectively placed on his son's shoulder. I noticed how he didn't look back at me, as if acknowledging my existence again would make this arrangement too real. My coworker Jenna approached me with wide eyes. "Did that just happen? Did a kid just try to hire you to date his father?" I couldn't answer her. My mind was spinning with too many questions and not enough answers. That night, I lay in my cramped studio apartment, staring at the ceiling with my phone clutched in my hand. The address Hendrix had texted me glowed on the screen, some upscale French bistro downtown that I'd only heard about in passing conversations between wealthy customers at the coffee shop. I had never been to a place like that. My entire wardrobe probably cost less than a single appetizer there. But what disturbed me more than the fancy venue was the strange feeling settling in my chest. It wasn't just about the money anymore, though I desperately needed it to cover my overdue rent and mounting bills. Something about Caleb's hopeful eyes and Hendrik's guarded demeanor had triggered something inside me. Curiosity mixed with concern. I thought about Caleb's words. He never smiles anymore. What had happened to this man? To turn him into someone so emotionally distant that his own child felt compelled to hire a stranger to bring some happiness into his life. The question haunted me as I drifted into restless sleep. The next morning, I woke up to another text from Hendrix. It was brief and businesslike. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. Dress code is smart casual. Caleb is excited. That last sentence felt like an afterthought, almost as if Hendrix himself didn't want to admit that maybe, just maybe, he was slightly curious too. I spent the entire day at work distracted, burning someone's latte and mixing up orders. Jenna kept giving me knowing looks, but mercifully didn't ask questions. When my shift ended, I rushed to a thrift store downtown and found a decent white button-down shirt and a pair of dark jeans that didn't have any visible wear. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As I stood in front of my bathroom mirror that evening before the dinner, trying to tame my hair and practicing what I would say, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. This wasn't a real date. It was a transaction, a favor for a lonely child and his emotionally unavailable father. Yet my reflection showed someone who looked nervous in a way that went beyond just meeting a high-profile alpha. My hands trembled slightly as I buttoned my shirt. What was I getting myself into? This wasn't just about money anymore. I could feel it in my bones. Hendrix and Caleb had somehow, in that brief encounter at the coffee shop, created a crack in the monotonous routine of my survival-focused existence. As I walked toward the restaurant locations saved on my phone's map, the city lights blurred around me. Each step felt heavier with the realization that after tonight, things would change. I didn't know how or why, but I could sense it. This arrangement, this strange, unconventional setup, was going to pull me into a world I didn't understand, with people whose wounds I couldn't see yet but could somehow feel. The restaurant came into view, its elegant facade illuminated by warm lighting. I paused at the corner, taking a deep breath. Behind those doors waited a man who had built walls so high that his son needed to recruit a stranger to breach them. And somehow I had agreed to try. I wasn't fully prepared for that night. Hendrix had given me the address, an upscale French bistro downtown, where entry required reservations made weeks in advance. I wore my best clothes, a simple white shirt and dark jeans, but when I walked inside, I instantly felt out of place. Everything was so polished, so expensive, that I felt like I had entered someone else's world. And then I saw them. Hendrix and Caleb sat at a corner table, soft amber light falling over them. Caleb waved at me the moment he saw me, excited with a genuine smile, but Hendrix's face remained completely stoic. He stood as I approached the table, and I walked toward them feeling his gaze analyzing every inch of me. "You're on time," Hendrix said in a flat tone, gesturing for me to sit. I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a subtle jab. I sat down nervously, placing my hands under the table. Caleb sat between us, watching his father and me as if this were the most interesting movie he'd ever seen. "Mr. Ryan, you're wearing really nice clothes," Caleb said happily. I smiled, a genuine one, because the child was truly sweet. But Hendrix interfered, his deep voice calmly saying, "Caleb, be polite. Don't call Ryan Mr. Use his name." Caleb giggled. "Okay, Ryan." Hendrix picked up the menu and handed it to me without a word. I nervously scanned it, my heartbeat quickening as I saw the prices. Every dish here cost more than my weekly groceries. "Order whatever you want," Hendrix said in his cold, composed tone. "I'm paying." I wanted to feel comfortable, but his presence was so heavy that I couldn't relax. We ordered, and when the waiter left, an awkward silence settled over us. Caleb broke it. "Ryan, what do you like? Painting? Music?" I looked at him and smiled. "Music. I play guitar sometimes." Caleb's eyes lit up. "Daddy plays piano too, but very rarely." I glanced at Hendrix in surprise. He was already looking at me with that same unreadable expression, as if he was considering stopping Caleb from talking too much. "Caleb, let's wait for the food first," Hendrix said softly but firmly. Finally, the child quieted down, though his smile remained. I sensed that Hendrix was hiding something from me: emotions, his past, maybe even himself. The food arrived, and I tried to focus on my plate, but I was constantly aware of Hendrix's gaze that occasionally lingered on me. Once our eyes met, and in that single second something electric passed between us, something I wanted to avoid. I quickly looked away. After dinner, Caleb went to the restroom, leaving me alone with Hendrix. The silence felt deafening. "You're uncomfortable," Hendrix suddenly said, swirling whiskey in his glass. "I'm fine. It's just all of this is a bit unexpected." Hendrix gave a slight nod. Then he leaned forward, his voice low and serious. "This arrangement is only for Caleb's happiness. Don't get any ideas, Ryan. This isn't real." His words were sharp, almost like a warning. But in his eyes I saw something else: defensiveness, perhaps even fear. I kept my voice steady as I said, "I understand. I'm here only for Caleb." Hendrix looked at me one last time, then leaned back and put his professional mask back on. But when Caleb returned and happily said goodbye to me, I noticed that Hendrix's gaze lingered on me a bit longer than necessary. When I left the restaurant, my heart was still racing. This was just a fake dinner. But why did it feel like the beginning of a connection that was completely unexpected and dangerous? The walk home felt longer than usual. The city streets were quieter now, the evening crowd having thinned out. I replayed every moment of the dinner in my head. The way Caleb had looked at me with such hope. The way Hendrix's jaw had tightened whenever I said something that seemed to affect him. The brief flashes of vulnerability I caught in his eyes before he masked them again. There was a story there, hidden beneath layers of control and carefully maintained distance. A story that involved pain, loss, and a fierce protectiveness over his son. I wanted to know it, even though I knew I shouldn't. This was supposed to be simple: one dinner, some money, and then we'd go our separate ways. But nothing about tonight had felt simple. When I reached my apartment, I found a notification on my phone: a bank transfer. Hendrix had already paid me, double what we'd discussed. I stared at the amount, my thumb hovering over the screen. This should have felt like a relief. My rent was covered now, my bills could be paid. Yet instead of gratitude, I felt something closer to disappointment. Was this his way of ensuring I understood the transaction was complete, that there would be no further contact? I tossed my phone onto the bed and walked to the small window overlooking the street below. The city lights twinkled in the distance, indifferent to the strange turmoil inside me. I thought about Caleb's laughter during dinner, the way he told me about his favorite subjects at school, his dreams of becoming a marine biologist so he could study whales. He was a bright, warm child trapped in a world that felt too cold, too controlled. And Hendrix, the man, was a fortress. Every word measured, every expression calculated. Yet there had been moments, fleeting but unmistakable, when the fortress showed cracks. When Caleb had accidentally spilled water on the table, Hendrix's immediate reaction had been gentle concern, not anger. When the child had mentioned missing family dinners, something had flickered across Hendrix's face. Grief, perhaps, or regret. These weren't the reactions of a man incapable of feeling. They were the reactions of someone who had learned to bury his feelings so deep that even he might have forgotten where he'd hidden them. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept seeing Hendrix's green eyes, the way they'd studied me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. I kept hearing Caleb's voice, asking why his father never smiled. And I kept wondering what had happened to create such distance between a man and his own capacity for joy. By the time morning light filtered through my window, I had convinced myself that this was over. One dinner, as agreed. I would move on with my life, and they would move on with theirs. The universe, however, seemed to have different plans. My phone buzzed just as I was making coffee, a message from Hendrix. My heart jumped before I even read it. Caleb wants to see you again. Aquarium, tomorrow afternoon. I stared at the words, my coffee forgotten. This wasn't supposed to happen. We had an agreement. One dinner, nothing more. But Caleb wanted to see me. Despite every logical reason to decline, despite knowing that getting further involved would only complicate things, I found my fingers typing a response I hadn't consciously decided to send. Okay. The aquarium was surprisingly peaceful when I arrived. Caleb immediately ran toward me and hugged me, completely natural and warm. Ryan, I was waiting for you. I ruffled his hair and smiled. I wanted to see you too, buddy. Hendrix stood a short distance away, hands in his pockets, observing us with that same guarded expression. But today, something was different. He seemed slightly softer. Maybe it was the natural blue lighting, or perhaps his rolled-up sleeves and casual attire made him less intimidating. Caleb grabbed my hand and pulled me toward a large glass tank where colorful fish were swimming. I glanced at Hendrix, silently asking for permission, and he gave a slight nod. The three of us stood there, Caleb in the middle, excitedly pointing at the fish while we flanked him on both sides. Daddy, look at that blue one, Caleb demanded. Hendrix hesitated for a second, then slowly placed his hand on Caleb's shoulder and pointed at the fish. I helped too, telling Caleb facts about the marine life. And in those moments, something strange happened. The three of us felt normal, like a real family. The thought scared me. I looked away and glanced at Hendrix from the side. He was watching Caleb with a mixture of pure affection and pain, and I understood. This man loved Caleb deeply, but something was emotionally blocking him. Something from his past. Ryan, Hendrix suddenly looked at me. Why are you here? Tell me the truth. I was shocked. The question was so direct and raw. I thought about telling the truth, but would he be able to handle it? Because seeing Caleb happy feels good, I said softly. And I need connection more than money. Hendrix's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but in his eyes something flickered, a small flash of vulnerability. Then Caleb jumped in and said, "Let's get ice cream," and the mood broke. The three of us went to an ice cream parlor. Caleb was choosing his favorite chocolate flavor while Hendrix and I stood near the counter. "You're good with him," Hendrix said quietly, almost unwillingly. I looked at him. This was the first time he'd acknowledged something personal. "Thanks," I whispered. Hendrix turned fully toward me, his voice low. "But remember, Ryan, this is temporary. I don't want to bring you permanently into my, or Caleb's life." His words stung, but I understood. He was protecting himself. Maybe someone had hurt him in the past. I nodded, but my heart felt heavy because now I was feeling something I didn't want to feel. Caleb bounced between us as we walked back toward the aquarium entrance, his small hand alternating between holding mine and his father's. He chattered excitedly about the octopus he'd seen, about how he wanted to learn to scuba dive someday, about a book his teacher had recommended. His joy was infectious, and for brief moments I saw Hendrix's expression soften, really soften, as he listened to his son. These were the moments when the walls came down, when the fortress allowed a glimpse of the person trapped inside. I found myself watching Hendrix more than I should have. The way afternoon sunlight caught the sharp angle of his jaw, the way his shoulders relaxed incrementally when Caleb laughed, the way his eyes would flicker to me when he thought I wasn't looking, studying me with an intensity that made my skin tingle. When we finally said goodbye in the parking lot, Caleb hugged me tightly. "Can we do this again? Please." I glanced at Hendrix, who stood a few feet away, his expression carefully neutral, but his body language tense. "We'll see, buddy," I said gently, not wanting to make promises I couldn't keep. But Caleb seemed satisfied with that answer. As they walked to Hendricks' car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than I'd earn in 5 years, I noticed something. Hendricks looked back at me just once. Our eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between us, an acknowledgement, a question, maybe even a beginning. I drove my old beat-up car back to my apartment, but my mind wasn't on the road. It was on the feeling of Caleb's small hand in mine. It was on Hendricks' rare, almost smiles. It was on the sensation of belonging somewhere, even temporarily, even artificially. When I got home, I found another message waiting for me. Not from Hendricks this time, but from an unknown number. "Stop seeing them. You don't belong in their world. This is your only warning." My blood ran cold. I read the message 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Who would send this and why? My first instinct was to call Hendricks, but I hesitated. We barely knew each other. This arrangement was supposed to be simple, transactional. Getting him involved in what might be just some random prank seemed like overstepping boundaries that were already blurry enough. But as the evening wore on, the message kept bothering me. The tone wasn't playful or joking. It felt threatening, personal. Someone was watching us. Someone knew about the arrangements. And someone didn't want me around. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every sound outside my window made me jump. Every notification on my phone made my heart race. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I made a decision. I would tell Hendricks. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because if someone was targeting me, they might target Caleb next. And that thought was unbearable. I drafted a message to Hendricks, deleted it, drafted another one, deleted that too. How do you tell someone that you've received a threatening message about spending time with their child? How do you explain that what started as a paid arrangement now felt like something you wanted to protect? Finally, I settled on simple honesty. "We need to talk." Something happened. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The message showed as delivered, then read almost immediately. Hendricks was awake too. 3 dots appeared, indicating he was typing, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a response came through. "My office tomorrow morning. 9 sharp. No questions asked. No demands for explanation, just immediate action." And somehow that told me everything I needed to know about who Hendricks really was beneath the cold exterior. A protector, a father who would move heaven and earth for his son's safety. And maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to see me as someone worth protecting too. The next evening, Hendricks invited me to his home. The message was straightforward. "Caleb wants to show you his drawings, if you're available." I knew this was meant for Caleb, but my heart raced as I stood before the mansion gates. This house, or perhaps calling it a castle would be more accurate, was on an entirely different level. High ceilings, marble floors, and every corner perfectly designed. Yet despite all this grandeur, there was no warmth here. Everything felt cold and empty. Caleb opened the door and pulled me inside, clutching a small notebook in his hands. "Ryan, look. I drew you." He proudly displayed a page, a stick figure holding a guitar. I smiled, genuinely touched. "This is really good, Caleb. You're talented." Caleb blushed and led me toward the living room, where Hendricks was already seated, working on his laptop. He glanced at me and nodded, formal and distant. But there was a flicker in his eyes that I was beginning to recognize. He was noticing me. "Sit," Hendricks gestured. I settled onto the couch while Caleb stayed close, continuing to show me his drawings. Hendricks kept working, but I could sense his attention was divided between his screen and us. After a while, Caleb fell asleep against my shoulder. I carefully laid him on the sofa and covered him with a blanket. When I straightened up, Hendricks was watching me, intense and unreadable. "Coffee?" he asked suddenly. I was surprised. This was the first time he'd directly offered me anything. "Sure," I replied, following him to the kitchen. The kitchen was as meticulously organized as the rest of the house. Glass counters, high-end appliances. Hendrix silently prepared the coffee while I stood awkwardly near the counter. "You feel out of place here," Hendrix said without turning around, preparing the cups. "A little," I admitted. "All of this. It's very different from my life." Hendrix looked at me, handing me a cup. "What is your life like, Ryan?" The question was so unexpected that I was taken aback. When had anyone genuinely asked me that? "I work at a coffee shop, try to afford rent, and basically just survive," I shrugged. Hendrix sipped his coffee, his gaze steady on me. "Doesn't all of this, the fake dating, coming to my house, seem strange to you?" "It does," I answered honestly. "But for Caleb's sake, it feels worth it." Hendrix's jaw tightened. He set his cup on the counter and moved closer to me. "For Caleb only?" "For him." His voice was low, almost challenging. My heart beat faster. I didn't know the answer to that question myself. "I don't know," I whispered. Hendrix's expression flickered, frustration, confusion, and something else. "You don't understand, Ryan," he said, his voice strained. "I don't want you in my life. I don't want anyone, because I don't want to hurt someone again." His words were heavy, laden with pain. I understood. Something had happened in his past. Someone had left him, probably Caleb's mother. "I won't hurt you," I said softly, not even sure why I said it. Hendrix looked into my eyes deeply, searchingly, and in that moment the space between us seemed to shrink. I could feel his breath, his closeness. But then he stepped back. "You don't understand," he repeated, walking back toward the living room, leaving me alone in that cold, perfect kitchen. I stood there, listening to the irregular beating of my heart, realizing that Hendrix wasn't just physically guarded. His emotional walls were so high that I might never be able to cross them. But one thing was clear. I wasn't here just for Caleb anymore. I wanted to understand Hendrix too. And that realization was the most terrifying of all. I returned to the living room, where Caleb still slept peacefully. Hendrix had closed his laptop and was sitting in the dim light, his head resting against the back of the chair, eyes closed. He looked exhausted, not physically, but emotionally, like someone carrying weights nobody else could see. I sat quietly in the chair across from him, not wanting to disturb whatever fragile peace he'd found. "I built this house after she left," Hendrix said suddenly, his eyes still closed. "I thought if I created something perfect, something controlled, I could prevent chaos from entering our lives again. But perfection is just another prison." I didn't know what to say. These were the most personal words he'd shared with me. "Caleb doesn't need perfection," I ventured carefully. "He just needs you, the real you." Hendrix's eyes opened, and he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What if the real me isn't enough? What if I'm as broken as this house is cold? His vulnerability in that moment was staggering. This powerful CEO, this man who commanded boardrooms and built empires, was admitting to feeling inadequate as a father. "You're more than enough," I said firmly. "Caleb adores you. I can see it in everything he does, every word he speaks about you." Hendrix sat forward, his elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. "She said I was incapable of real emotion, that I chose work over family. That's why she left. And maybe she was right." The pain in his voice cut through me. "If she was right, you wouldn't be sitting here worrying about whether you're enough for your son. You wouldn't have agreed to this ridiculous arrangement just to see him smile. You wouldn't be terrified of letting people in because you're afraid of hurting them." Hendrix looked at me sharply. "You think you know me after a few meetings?" There was defensiveness in his tone, but also something else. Hope. Maybe. That someone could see past the walls he'd built. "I know what I see," I replied. "And I see someone who loves deeply but is scared to show it. Someone who thinks isolation is safety." The silence that followed was different from the awkward pauses we'd had before. This was heavy, loaded with things neither of us knew how to articulate. Finally, Hendricks stood and walked to the window overlooking the garden. My lawyer advised me to end this arrangement. He said it could complicate things if Caleb's mother decides to challenge custody. Having an outsider involved, paying someone to spend time with my son. It looks questionable. My stomach dropped. Are you ending it? Hendricks turned to face me. That's what I should do. The logical choice, the safe choice. He paused. But Caleb asks about you every day. When can he see Ryan again? What do you think Ryan would like? Can Ryan come to his school art show? His voice softened. And honestly, I find myself wondering the same things. My breath caught. This was as close to an admission as I was likely to get from someone like Hendricks. I don't want to complicate your life, I said. But I also don't want to disappear from Caleb's life if I can help it. He's a special kid. Hendricks crossed the room until he stood directly in front of me. It's not just about Caleb anymore, is it? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I could lie. I could keep this professional, keep it simple. But something about the vulnerability he'd shown tonight made me want to be honest. No, I admitted. It's not just about Caleb. Hendricks' hand reached out, hesitated, then gently touched my shoulder. It was the first deliberate physical contact between us that wasn't a handshake. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. I don't know how to let someone in without destroying everything. Maybe you don't have to know, I suggested. Maybe you just have to try. He studied my face for a long moment, and I could see him weighing risks, calculating outcomes, trying to maintain control over a situation that was rapidly becoming uncontrollable. Then Caleb stirred on the couch, mumbling in his sleep, and the moment broke. Hendricks stepped back, his professional mask sliding back into place, though not quite as securely as before. It's late, he said. I'll call you a car. As I waited for the ride in the grand foyer, Caleb having been carried to his bed, Hendricks stood with me in silence. Just before the car arrived, he spoke once. Thank you for tonight. For understanding. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As I rode home through the quiet city streets, I realized that tonight had changed something fundamental between us. The walls were still there, but now I could see the cracks. And more importantly, Hendricks was letting me see them. I thought Hendricks' past would remain a mystery. But one day, everything unfolded in the most unexpected way. I was with Caleb at an ice cream parlor when he checked his phone. Apparently, Hendricks had given him a basic device for emergencies. Suddenly, his expression changed completely. Ryan, look at this, Caleb said nervously, turning his screen toward me. There was a message from an unknown number. Tell your father I'm coming back. He can't hide forever. My heart sank. This was obviously from Caleb's mother, but the message was directly threatening and deeply disturbing. Caleb, when did this arrive? I asked gently, trying to keep my voice calm despite the panic rising inside me. Just now, a few minutes ago, Caleb whispered, fear evident in his eyes. I made an immediate decision. Come on, we need to tell Hendricks right now. We hurried to Hendricks' office. Caleb knew the address. When we reached the reception, security initially tried to stop us, but Caleb showed his face, and they immediately recognized him as the boss's son. We were sent straight to the top floor. Hendricks was in a meeting when we burst in without knocking. He looked shocked and slightly annoyed, but when he saw Caleb's frightened face, everything else faded away. What happened? Hendricks asked immediately, standing up and ignoring his meeting attendees. I handed him Caleb's phone. Hendricks read the message, and his entire body tensed. His jaw clenched, and an anger appeared in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Cancel the meeting, he told his assistant sharply. Now. The people quickly left, leaving behind an awkward silence. Hendricks pulled Caleb into a tight, protective embrace. You're safe. I promise you that. Then he looked at me, a mixture of gratitude and frustration in his gaze. Why did you bring him here? I could have handled this. Because this is serious, I said firmly. And Caleb was scared. He needed you. Hendrik's expression softened slightly. He sat Caleb in his chair and knelt in front of him. Caleb, listen. Your mother, she's confused. But I will never let you meet her if you don't want to. Understood? Caleb nodded, but tears still filled his eyes. Daddy, will she take me away? Hendrik's voice cracked. Never. I will never let you go. I watched Hendrik's vulnerability, raw and unfiltered. This wasn't the powerful CEO. This was a terrified father. Hendrix took a deep breath and called his lawyer, explaining the situation. I sat beside Caleb, holding his hand, trying to comfort him. When the call ended, Hendrix looked at both of us, exhausted and defeated. I didn't want you both to see this, Hendrix said quietly. How messy my life really is. Hendrix, I said softly. Everyone's life has problems. But you're not alone. I'm here, for Caleb, and for you too. Surprise flashed in Hendrik's eyes. He was about to say something, but then Caleb interrupted. Daddy, can Ryan stay with us tonight? I'm scared. Hendrix looked at me, conflicted and vulnerable. Ryan, you. Yes, I interrupted. I'll stay. And in that moment, our arrangement became something else. Something real. Something that bound the three of us together against the storm coming our way. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and tense planning. Hendrik's lawyer arrived at the office, a sharp woman named Patricia who immediately took control of the situation. She interviewed Caleb gently about the message, documented everything, and began drafting legal responses. I sat in the corner of Hendrik's office, feeling both necessary and intrusive. This was family business, private territory I had no real right to occupy. Yet every time I considered leaving, Caleb would look at me with those worried eyes, and I'd stay. As evening approached, Hendrix dismissed Patricia with instructions to file for an emergency restraining order first thing in the morning. When we were finally alone again, the three of us in that vast office, the weight of the day seemed to settle over us like a heavy blanket. I should explain, Hendrix said, his voice tired. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, the professional armor showing cracks. About Caleb's mother. About why this is happening. Caleb had fallen asleep in the corner on a small couch, exhausted from the emotional turmoil. Hendrix looked at his son with such tenderness that it made my chest ache. We don't have to talk about this now, I offered. You look exhausted. No, Hendrix said firmly. You deserve to know what you've gotten yourself into. He poured himself a drink from the bar in his office, just water this time, not alcohol, and leaned against his desk. I met her in college. She was charming, ambitious, everything I thought I wanted. We got married quickly, too quickly. I was building my company, working constantly, and she felt neglected. I understand that now. But when Caleb was born, instead of bringing us together, it pushed us further apart. His voice grew quieter. She said motherhood felt like a cage, that I'd trapped her in a life she never wanted. One day she just left, packed her things while I was at work, took nothing of Caleb's, and disappeared. Left a note saying she needed to find herself, that she'd made a mistake, that we both deserved better than her resentment. I stayed silent, letting him continue. For 3 years, nothing. No calls, no visits, no support. Caleb would ask about her sometimes, and I never knew what to say. How do you tell a child that his mother chose herself over him? The pain in Hendrik's voice was palpable. And now she's back. My investigator found out she's broke. Her new relationship failed. Her business ventures collapsed. And suddenly she remembers she has a son. But I know her. This isn't about Caleb. This is about financial security. What does she want? I asked. Money. A settlement. She's threatening to claim I'm an unfit father, that I'm emotionally unavailable, that Caleb needs his mother. He paused, his face contorted with guilt. And the worst part is, some of it is true. I am emotionally unavailable. I do work too much. I'm not the father Caleb deserves. I stood and walked over to him. Stop. Caleb is happy, healthy, loved. and secure. That's what matters. You're doing your best, and your best is pretty remarkable. Hendrix looked at me with such intensity that I almost stepped back. Why are you doing this, Ryan? Why do you care so much about us? It was the question I'd been avoiding asking myself. Because Caleb reminds me of myself as a kid, wanting connection, wanting to feel like I mattered. And because I hesitated. Because you're trying so hard to be strong that you've forgotten it's okay to need help sometimes. Something shifted in Hendrix's expression. The walls didn't come down entirely, but they shifted enough for me to see the person behind them more clearly. I don't deserve your kindness. It's not about deserving, I replied. It's about being human. We stood there in the dim office light, the city glowing through the windows behind us, and for the first time I felt like we truly saw each other. Not as employer and employee, not as strangers bound by circumstance, but as two people trying to navigate impossible situations. The moment was broken by Caleb stirring on the couch. Hendrix immediately went to him, checking if he was okay. The tenderness in that gesture, the way he tucked the blanket around his son, the way his entire demeanor softened. It told me everything I needed to know about who Hendrix really was beneath the cold exterior. That night at Hendrix Mansion, Caleb slept between us in the guest room, safe and warm. Hendrix and I talked late into the night, about his past, his fears, the legal battle ahead. And for the first time, he trusted me completely. He told me how Caleb's mother had left exactly 1 year after their wedding, claiming that motherhood and commitment weren't for her. How she'd run off with someone else, and now that her new life had failed, she wanted back purely for revenge and money. I won't let her near Caleb, Hendrix said fiercely. Whatever it takes. I took his hand, silently promising that I was with him. And in that moment, the walls Hendrix had built began to crack, just a little bit more. The next few days were strangely peaceful. Hendrix had activated his legal team for the restraining order, and I found myself visiting their home almost daily, no longer just for the arrangement, but because I genuinely wanted to. But one night, Caleb had gone to a friend's house for a sleepover, and Hendrix invited me to dinner, just the two of us. I felt nervous as I arrived at his house. This was the first time we'd been truly alone together properly, without any distractions. Hendrix had cooked dinner himself, simple pasta and wine. We sat at the dining table with candles softly glowing. You look nervous, Hendrix said with a slight smile, the first real smile I'd seen on his face. Because I am, I admitted, laughing nervously. I never imagined I'd be here with you like this. Hendrix's smile faded, replaced by something intense. I didn't either. But Ryan, you've changed something for me. His words made my heart race. I sipped my wine, trying to calm myself. Changed what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Hendrix leaned forward, his gaze locked on mine. I used to protect myself. I didn't let anyone get close, except Caleb. But you came in naturally. And now I can't imagine things without you here. My breath caught. This admission was so raw and honest. Hendrix, I started, but he stood and came closer to me. He knelt in front of my chair, placing his hands on my knees. I know this is complicated. I know I initially kept you around just for the arrangement. But now I have real feelings for you. Tears welled in my eyes. I felt the same way, deeply, terrifyingly. Me too, I whispered. I've become attached to you too. Relief and fear mixed in Hendrix's eyes. He slowly cupped my face in his hands, stroking my cheek with his thumb. May I kiss you? He asked, his voice husky. I nodded, unable to form words. And then his lips were on mine, soft and hesitant at first, then deeper and more desperate. This kiss expressed everything we'd been too afraid to say. When we pulled apart, we were both breathless. I don't want to hurt you, Hendrix whispered against my lips. And I won't hurt you either, I promised. We kissed again, this time with more urgency, emotions overflowing. The night progressed naturally. We moved to the living room, entangled on the couch, exploring each other emotionally and physically. Hendrix was surprisingly gentle, constantly checking if I was comfortable, and I was completely because this wasn't just physical. This was emotional surrender from both of us. The next morning, when I woke up, Hendrix lay beside me sleeping peacefully. I looked at his face, relaxed, vulnerable, and realized this was the Hendrix the world never got to see. I softly touched his hair, and he woke up, his eyes showing confusion first, then realization, then tenderness. "Good morning," he whispered. "Good morning," I smiled back. "Is this real?" Hendrix asked, almost childlike in his vulnerability. "Yes," I said confidently. "This is real." We lay there together, the silence comfortable now. But then Hendrix's phone rang. He answered reluctantly, his expression immediately changing to serious and tense. "What happened?" I asked, concerned. "Caleb's mother. She's involved the media. She's making false allegations that I'm an unfit father and neglecting Caleb. She's calling a press conference." My heart sank. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It had become a public war. But when Hendrix looked at me, scared yet determined, I knew what we had to do. We would face this together. Because we weren't just a fake arrangement anymore. We were real. And I would protect Hendrix and Caleb no matter what. "We'll win this," I said, taking Hendrix's hand. "The truth will come out. And I'm with you every step of the way." Hendrix squeezed my hand back, hope returning to his eyes. "Yes, together." And in that moment, we decided that no matter what the world said, we would write our own story together, fearlessly. The press conference was scheduled for that afternoon. Hendrix's publicist called in a panic, explaining that Caleb's mother had already contacted 3 major news outlets. She was claiming emotional abandonment, that Hendrix had prioritized his business empire over his family, that Caleb was being raised by nannies and strangers. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was technically a stranger she could point to as evidence. "We need to get ahead of this," Patricia, the lawyer, said during an emergency conference call. "Hendrix, you need to make a statement. Show the public who you really are as a father." But Hendrix looked paralyzed. This was his worst nightmare. His private life, his failures, his vulnerabilities exposed for public consumption. I watched him struggling, saw the panic building behind his carefully maintained composure. "Then let me help," I said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at me. "Let me be there, not hiding, not as some secret. If she's going to use me as ammunition anyway, let's control the narrative." Hendrix stared at me. "Ryan, you don't have to." "I want to," I interrupted. "Because what we have isn't something to hide or be ashamed of. You're an incredible father. Caleb is thriving. And yes, you brought me into his life through an unconventional arrangement. But look at what it became. Look at what we became." Patricia nodded slowly. "He's right. Authenticity is your best weapon here. Show them the truth, that you're a father who loves his son so much that you tried everything, even something unconventional, to bring joy into his life." Hendrix stood and walked to the window, his back to us. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then he turned around, and I saw determination in his eyes. "All right, we do this together. But I need Caleb kept completely out of the media circus. Whatever happens, he stays protected." That afternoon, we stood in front of cameras and reporters, Hendrix in a perfectly tailored suit, me in the best clothes I owned, trying not to look as terrified as I felt. Caleb was safely at a friend's house, unaware of the storms swirling around him. Hendrix's statement was simple and honest. He explained that after his divorce, he'd struggled to balance being a single father with running a company. That Caleb had taken it upon himself to find someone to help his father smile again. That what had started as an arrangement had evolved into something meaningful. He didn't hide our relationship. He didn't apologize for it. He simply stated the facts with quiet dignity. The questions came fast and fierce. "Are you paying him to be in a relationship with you? Is this appropriate given that you're a father? What do you say to allegations that you're an unfit parent? Hendricks handled each one with composure, but I could see the toll it was taking. Finally, I spoke up. I'm not here because of money, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm here because Caleb is an amazing kid who deserved to see his father happy. And because Hendricks is one of the most devoted fathers I've ever met. He didn't abandon his family abandoned him. He spent every day since trying to be enough for his son. The room went quiet. Then the questions shifted, became less aggressive, more curious. When we finally left the press conference, Hendricks was shaking. In the car, away from cameras and judgment, he leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Thank you, he whispered, for standing with me. I took his hand. Always. We didn't know yet how the public would react, what Caleb's mother would do next, or what challenges lay ahead. But we knew we would face them together. And somehow, that made everything else bearable. The days following the press conference were a blur of media coverage, legal strategy, and emotional exhaustion. But through it all, Hendricks and I grew stronger together. The public response was surprisingly supportive. People responded to Hendricks' honesty, to the visible love between him and Caleb, to the genuine connection he and I shared. The narrative had shifted from scandal to redemption. Caleb's mother, seeing her strategy backfire, began to back down. Her lawyer reached out to Patricia with a settlement offer, less than her original demands, but still substantial. Hendricks, after consulting with his team, decided to accept, not because she deserved it, but because the cost of fighting would be higher than the cost of paying her to disappear. She's gone, Hendricks told me one evening, relief evident in his voice. She signed the agreement this morning. She's moving abroad, and she's agreed not to contact Caleb until he's 18. I wrapped my arms around him. It's over. It's over, he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. We're free. That night, we celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, just the three of us. Caleb, oblivious to the legal complexities, was simply happy that his mother wasn't coming to take him away. He chattered about his day at school, his upcoming art show, his dreams of becoming a marine biologist. Ryan, he said suddenly, are you going to stay with us forever? The question caught me off guard. I looked at Hendricks, who was watching me with an intensity that made my heart skip. I hope so, I said carefully. If you'll have me. Caleb's face lit up. Yes. Hendricks reached across the table and took my hand. Forever, he said quietly. I think that can be arranged. Months passed, and life settled into a beautiful new rhythm. I moved into the mansion, not as a hired companion, but as family. My coffee shop job became a part-time memory as I transitioned to working with Hendricks Foundation, helping other families in crisis navigate similar challenges. Caleb thrived. His confidence grew, his smile became more frequent, and his relationship with his father deepened in ways that made my heart sing. And Hendricks, the cold, guarded CEO I'd first met, was becoming someone else entirely. He laughed more, smiled freely, and let himself be vulnerable in ways he never had before. He was still the powerful alpha who commanded boardrooms, but at home he was simply daddy to Caleb and love to me. One evening, as we sat on the terrace overlooking the city, Caleb asleep inside, Hendricks took my hand. I never thought I'd have this, he said quietly. A family, a home, someone who sees me, really sees me, and doesn't run away. I leaned into him. I'm not going anywhere. I told you that from the beginning. He kissed my forehead. I know, and I believe you now. We sat in comfortable silence, the city lights glittering below us. The journey had been unexpected, complicated, and at times terrifying. But it had led us here, to this moment, this family, this love. So, I said finally, about that arrangement. Hendricks looked at me, a small smile playing on his lips. What about it? I think it's time we made it official. His eyes widened. Are you saying? I'm saying that I love you, Hendricks. And I love Caleb. and I want to spend the rest of my life with both of you." He pulled me into a kiss that said everything words couldn't. When we finally broke apart, his eyes were shining. "Ryan," he whispered, "will you marry me?" I laughed through tears of joy. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped a ring onto my finger, a simple silver band with a small diamond that caught the light, and kissed me again. Inside, Caleb slept peacefully, dreaming of whales and ocean adventures. And outside, under a canopy of stars, two hearts found their forever. 5 years later, I stood in the garden of our estate, watching Caleb chase a soccer ball with his little sister, Lily. Hendrix came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "What are you thinking?" he murmured against my ear. "Just how lucky we are," I said, leaning into him. "How different everything is from that day at the coffee shop." He chuckled. "I still can't believe Caleb hired you with crumpled dollar bills. I still can't believe you agreed to it." I would have agreed to anything to see him smile, but I got so much more than I bargained for. I turned in his arms and kissed him. Me too. The sun was setting over the city, casting everything in a warm golden glow. Our children laughed in the distance. Our life was full, and in that moment, surrounded by love and family and joy, I knew that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes they start with crumpled dollar bills and a 7-year-old's desperate hope. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they end with everything you never knew you wanted. The weeks following our engagement were a whirlwind of activity. Hendrix, the man who could negotiate billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, became completely overwhelmed by the simple task of choosing between ivory and cream for the tablecloths. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, staring at a stack of fabric samples spread across his desk. "Why are there 17 shades of white?" I laughed, kissing his cheek. "Welcome to wedding planning. I told you we could just elope." "No," he said firmly. "You deserve a proper wedding. You deserve to have everyone see how much I love you." I softened. "I don't need a big ceremony to know that. I already know. Let me do this for you, Ryan. Please." So I let him. And he threw himself into the planning with the same intensity he brought to everything else, researching venues, tasting cakes, reviewing flower arrangements with the precision of a corporate audit. It was adorable and slightly terrifying. Caleb, of course, was the most enthusiastic participant in the entire process. He insisted on being the ring bearer and took his responsibilities with the seriousness of a military general. "I need to practice," he announced one evening, marching into the living room with a pillow and 2 plastic rings. "Daddy, you and Ryan need to stand at the end of the aisle." "Which aisle?" Hendrix asked, looking up from his laptop. "This one." Caleb pointed at the imaginary path between the coffee table and the couch. "Now walk." Hendrix looked at me, a helpless expression on his face. I shrugged, grinning. "You heard the ring bearer. Walk." We spent the next 30 minutes practicing Caleb's official walk. He took it very seriously, lecturing us on proper spacing and timing. By the end, we were both laughing so hard we could barely stand. "I think you're going to be the best ring bearer ever," I told Caleb, ruffling his hair. "I know," he said matter-of-factly, "but I still think we need more practice. Just in case." The night before the wedding, Hendrix's friends insisted on taking him out for a stag party. I had my own small gathering with a few close friends, but I found myself checking my phone obsessively, waiting for updates. Around midnight, a photo came through. Hendrix, surrounded by his friends, looking mildly uncomfortable but smiling. He was holding a glass of champagne, and someone had put a ridiculously oversized hat on his head. I laughed, saving the image. This was a side of Hendrix I rarely saw. Relaxed, silly, not the CEO, but just a man celebrating with friends. A message followed. "I love you. Can't wait to marry you tomorrow." My heart swelled. I typed back, "I love you too. Try to get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. I'll sleep when I'm dead." Too excited. I smiled, putting my phone down. Tomorrow, everything would change, for the better. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring day, as if the universe itself had decided to cooperate. I stood in front of the mirror in my dressing room, adjusting my simple white suit, my hands trembling slightly. "You look beautiful," Jenna said, appearing behind me. She'd flown in for the wedding, and her presence was a comforting reminder of where I'd come from. "I can't believe the coffee shop guy is getting married to a billionaire CEO." "I can't believe it either," I admitted. "Some days I still think I'm going to wake up in my studio apartment." "You're not," she said firmly. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be, and you deserve it." The ceremony was held in the garden of the estate, the same garden where I'd first seen the cracks in Hendrik's walls. Flowers bloomed everywhere, and fairy lights twinkled in the trees. About 50 guests watched as I walked down the aisle, and at the end stood Hendrix, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit, his green eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Beside him, Caleb held the ring pillow with fierce concentration, his small face a mask of solemn importance. I reached the altar, and Hendrix took my hands. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "You're not so bad yourself," I whispered back. The ceremony was simple and perfect. We wrote our own vows. Hendrix spoke of finding light in the darkness, of learning to love again, of the family we'd built together. I spoke of unexpected beginnings and lasting love, of a 7-year-old boy who had changed everything with crumpled dollar bills. When we exchanged rings and kissed, the applause was deafening. Caleb tugged on our sleeves, demanding to be included, and we laughed, pulling him into our embrace. "We're a family now," Hendrix said, his voice thick with emotion. "We always were," I replied. "We just made it official." The reception was everything we'd hoped for: good food, better wine, and plenty of dancing. Caleb insisted on being the first to dance with us, and we twirled him around until he collapsed in a fit of giggles. "He's going to sleep well tonight," I observed. "I think we all will," Hendrix agreed, pulling me close. "Thank you, Ryan, for everything." "Thank you for letting me in," I said. "For trusting me, for loving me." He kissed me, and the world faded away. Behind us, our guests cheered. Ahead of us, a lifetime of moments awaited. "I love you," he murmured against my lips. "I love you too," I whispered back. "Now and always." The morning after our wedding, I woke up in Hendrik's arms, sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a moment, I just lay there, listening to his steady breathing, marveling at how different my life had become. "Good morning, husband," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning, husband," I replied, grinning. He opened his eyes, and the look of pure happiness on his face made my heart swell. "I never thought I'd have this," he said quietly. "A family, a home, someone to wake up next to." "Neither did I admitted. "But here we are." "I love you," he said. "I'm going to say it every day for the rest of our lives. I'm going to hold you to that." He kissed me, and it was soft and slow, full of promises and tomorrows. Outside, the birds sang. Inside, our family was complete. Years passed, and life settled into a beautiful routine. Caleb grew into a smart, confident teenager who still insisted on calling me Ryan, even though I'd been his father for over a decade. Lily, our daughter, inherited her father's intensity and my stubbornness, and she was fiercely protective of everyone she loved. Hendrix and I grew old together, our love deepening with each passing year. He still had his moments of doubt, his flashes of insecurity, but I was always there to remind him of how far he'd come. And every year on our anniversary, we took a moment to remember how it all began, with crumpled dollar bills and a 7-year-old's desperate hope. "I still can't believe it," I'd say, shaking my head. "Believe it," he'd reply, pulling me close. "Because it's real. We're real." And I'd smile, leaning into his embrace, grateful for every single moment that had led me here. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes they start with a child's innocent plea and end with a family that was meant to be. And that, I realized, was the greatest love story of all. Every year on our anniversary, Hendrix and I revisited the place where it all began, the coffee shop where Caleb had first approached me with crumpled dollar bills. It had become our tradition, a quiet ritual that grounded us in the story of how we'd found each other. This year was our 10th anniversary. Caleb, now 17, rolled his eyes good-naturedly when we dragged him along. Do we really have to do this every year? Absolutely, I said, grinning. It's part of our origin story. You can't skip origin stories. He groaned, but I caught the smile he tried to hide. Lily, now 8, was fascinated by the whole thing. So you really hired Daddy with money? She asked, tugging on my sleeve. I did, Caleb confirmed, puffing up slightly. I was very determined. You were very determined to embarrass me, Hendrix muttered, but he was smiling too. We ordered our usual drinks and sat at the same table where Caleb had first pitched his plan. The coffee shop had changed over the years, new owners, new decor, but the corner table remained the same. I can't believe you actually said yes, Hendrix said, shaking his head. I couldn't afford to say no, I admitted. I was desperate, but I'm so glad I did. He took my hand. Me too. Ew, Caleb said flatly. Can we go get ice cream now? Ew, Lily echoed, giggling. We laughed, and I leaned into Hendrix's warmth. 10 years, a family, a life built from crumpled dollar bills and a child's love. It was the most unexpected beginning I could have imagined, and it had led to the most beautiful ending. And as we walked out of the coffee shop, hand in hand, our children bickering playfully behind us, I knew that this was exactly where I was meant to be. The best things in life, I've learned, often start with a leap of faith and a little bit of hope. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they last a lifetime.